dig a little bit deeper for the people who maybe just got married, who are listening in. Maybe you just got married and you hadn't had the money talk before. Here are 5 things that I would recommend you do in the first couple months of marriage so that you're on the same page financially. First and foremost, create a budget. That's going to look at all your day-to-day spending, and it's going to look at long-term savings goals so that you guys can be on the same page from day one. We've talked about a couple of different Chase and LearnVest tools that can make that really easy. Number 2 is have a debt repayment plan. It is absolutely critical to have a plan in place, otherwise debt can stick around and haunt you for a really long time. And again, we've talked about some really easy to use tools that would make that easy, both from Chase and from LearnVest. Number 3, plan for the unexpected. It happens all the time that clients tell me, I didn't anticipate having to pay this doctor's bill. I suddenly lost my job. Whatever the case may be, emergencies can sneak up on us and can drain our resources financially. So you're going to want to plan to have at least 6 months savings set aside for the unknown. Remember earlier how I mentioned that couple that was 10 years from retirement and not on the same page necessarily with what they wanted for the future? As crazy as it sounds, no matter how young you are, talking about retirement savings from day one is absolutely critical. And of course, number 5 is that you're going to have future goals. You may someday want to buy a house, start a family. You might want to buy a second vacation home someday. You might want to just take a trip around the world. Whatever it is that you're planning for, you want to know that you guys are on the same page and that you share the same goals and visions for the long term.
And Stephany, when you're worried and disorganized with your personal finances, it's much harder to know where you stand financially, and it creates a lot of stress, as you mentioned before. But when you are organized, you're much more capable of sticking to a budget and a plan and reaching your financial goals. I mentioned the Blueprint resource that Chase offers before, and when you're enrolled in Chase Blueprint, it enables you to basically have that money talk every single month. It helps you stick to your plan, so when you receive your statement, you see in black and white how you're progressing against that plan.
Fantastic, Jennifer. One of the things that we see happening more and more, and we talked about this already, is that a lot of people, I should say, are remarrying. And so a lot of times that means having blended families. We actually have had a question from the audience that I think this next section is going to help answer. When you have blended families, i.e. you and your significant other potentially have kids from prior marriages, there's some really important and very different money discussions that you might want to have. When you're blending families together, here are 3 key points that I would recommend. Number 1, look at your financial commitments outside of your household expenses. If one or both of you pays alimony or child support, that's important to talk about. Are those things that you're going to do on a household basis, or are those individual expenses, and how will you handle them? You might also want to look at specific savings goals. Maybe you have children from both marriages, and each of you has different college savings plans, and that's something to talk about. And then really importantly is estate planning. 40% of U.S. marriages involve a second marriage for at least one of the parties in the couple. So that tells me that there's probably a very good likelihood that some of you listening in today are probably in this situation. Estate planning we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail on the next page, but it is really, really important in a blended family situation.
And then combining blended families often comes with more questions and pitfalls beyond just your household finances. There could be things like differences of opinion on your allowance strategy. How do you want to talk to your children about how they should handle money? You should really have an open and honest conversation and set some ground rules about how you're going to raise your children, and when there are discrepancies, how you're going to deal with them.
Excellent idea. Let's take a look at some of the legal documents and talk a little bit more about beneficiaries and estate planning. This is going to cover a lot of different stages of relationships that we've talked about, but it is really important, especially for those of you out there that have blended families. First and foremost, if you're married or in a very committed relationship, you may want to consider designating each other as power of attorney. There's legal power of attorney, and then there's power of attorney for healthcare purposes. That ensures that if one of you cannot make decisions because something unexpected happens, the other person can step in and make decisions on your behalf. This is especially important in circumstances where you may be in a committed relationship, but you may not be legally married. So I would definitely recommend thinking about that. You'll also probably want to name each other as the beneficiary on certain accounts. Take a look back, and again, don't make any assumptions that you've already done this. Go back and check the paperwork for your retirement account and your life insurance, both of which you may have through your employers, and double check who's listed as the beneficiary. With bank accounts and regular investment accounts, you can set up what's called POD, payable on death, or TOD, transfer on death instructions. These are also really important, and all of these different types of beneficiary designations actually help move assets directly from your ownership to your beneficiary if anything happens to you, even if you don't have a will in place yet. They are very critical documents. So many times clients forget to make changes because you just assume, oh, I've already done that. And what I often find is that somebody will go back and realize that they've listed an ex-spouse as their beneficiary if they've gotten remarried, or that maybe they haven't added their kids as secondary beneficiaries if they've had children. Anytime you have a life event, go back and double check. Number 3, you may potentially want to create a last will and/or a living trust. A lot of us make the assumption that a living trust is only for people with a significant amount of wealth. The reality is that a trust is really designed to help you control how assets are transferred. This is really important if you're in blended family situations and you have kids from both marriages. It's also really important if you don't want your kids to directly inherit money early on in life, if you think that they might not be prepared to handle it until they're a little bit older. Last but not least, if the idea of a prenuptial agreement resonated with you, but you're already married, there is a such thing as a postnuptial agreement, and you can go back retroactively and divide up assets that you brought to the table before you were married. Somebody had asked whether or not why this would be important in blended families, and it's simply because you may potentially be bringing to the table more things to talk about and more potentially assets or debt or financial situations than if you didn't have a family prior. So that's something to think about. We've covered a lot of different information today, and we've gone through a lot of different life stages. It's been really fun talking to you guys about kind of how to have that money talk and what to do at different points in your relationship. As we saw, every situation is different. Every money talk that you're going to have, it never looks the same, even if you're talking to the same person. As your lives change, as your financial goals change, as you make progress together financially, you'll always have new things to talk about. Studies have shown pretty clearly that couples who feel the most successful in their relationship are couples who say they can talk about money. So I really want to encourage that you guys each take some time to sit down with your significant other and find a way to start this conversation.
And Stephany, I think we've discussed it's more than just a dialogue. They really have a plan, and they watch their plan and monitor their plan. And we've emphasized this throughout the course of this webinar. When your partner's in your finances and in your planning, you can really work together to achieve your big goals. And that could be having a big purchase or paying off debt. And as we've discussed, debt in particular can be a touchy subject for many couples. Often it can devolve into blame or finger pointing. So one of the keys to being happy is really keeping the lines of communication open to create a plan to pay down that debt. I think we've been able to give you a lot of tools and tips and resources to have that money talk with your partner. I think you can check out these great tools we've mentioned today, including both Chase Blueprint that helps you track your spending, pay down debt, get organized, and really have a better plan.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I think the key to this whole thing is having a plan, and it all stems from being able to have that initial conversation. To wrap up our session today, I just want to leave you with a final reminder. It's time, if you've never done it, to have that first money talk, and it's time to revisit money discussions that you've had in the past. So set aside some time in the next 2 weeks, casually work this into a conversation, or blame LearnVest if you have to, and get out there and get going with the money talk conversation.